Board, a highly respected economic research association. China will overtake the U.S. as the world's biggest economy by 2012 within a couple of years. Can you believe that? Well, up next, Charles Goyette joins us as we talk about the dollar meltdown on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Noory. We have a fascinating hour for you. Charles Goyette has often been called upon to share his views about the intersection of politics and economics with audiences all across the planet. He warns of the current economic turmoil. He said America's debt is a powder keg about to blow, and this story about China becoming the number one economy in 2 years. Charles, absolutely unbelievable, isn't it?
George, it's great to talk to you again. Yes, it is unbelievable. I suppose it's inevitable, and it would be nice if the United States would follow policies that would increase our prosperity and productivity. But it seems that our leadership has other things in mind. I
think so too. What's new with you these days, Charles?
Well, the main thing that I'm concerned about these days, George, is this new initiative by the Federal Reserve, this new quantitative easing 2 program that was, and in fact, here's what frosts me and probably will frost your listeners, is that the American people had just about enough of these giveaways. You remember 2 years ago, during the debate over the Bush $700 billion bailout bill, the opposition to it was so widespread. There was one congressman who said that his calls against it were running 50-50, 50% no, and 50% hell no. but of course it passed anyway.
Yeah.
And so this riled the people up, and they linked arms together, and they started organizing, and they formed tea parties and more to oppose this kind of wealth transfer business and these bailouts. And you would think with 36 members of Congress, House and Senate, having fallen by the boards up through Tuesday's election, that would be the end of it, at least for the time being. But in fact, to just almost poke us in the eye with an indifference, a cavalier indifference to who's running the show in this country. It was the day after the election that the Federal Reserve Open Market Committee's new announcement was given that they plan. This is bigger than Obama's stimulus program of $787 billion or the Bush $700 billion program. This is really effectively almost $1 trillion. It's a $900 billion program or initiative created by the Federal Reserve that is effectively nothing more than a money printing program. Who debated this? Who voted for it? Who wanted it? And what will it effectively be? Effectively, it's going to be a wealth transfer to Wall Street from the pockets of the American people, and this is what I'm really upset about.
Well, and the Fed, of course, private enterprise, it's like, Charles, they're taking over all on their own.
They are taking over, and of course the job that they've done. I mean, how much more of a wake-up call do we need? If your grandfather or somebody's great-grandfather had started a business 100 years ago or so, and you'd turn it over to a management company, and over the course of the last 98 or 99 years, they had destroyed 94% of the value of the company, they wouldn't be able to come to you with a straight face and say, you got to appoint us for another round. But this is what the Fed has done with the dollar under its management. It's actually 95% of the dollar's purchasing power has been squandered, and now they're engaging in this massive new money printing exercise. They're actually doubling down on QE1 was $1.7 trillion in securities purchases by the Federal Reserve, all kinds of mystery meat. I mean, nobody knows really what's in there. These were assets and investments made by the investment banking community. These people had made billions of dollars in fees. They had dazzled us all with their fancy footwork. When there were profits, they kept the profits, but when there were losses, they shifted them over to the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve so that they would eventually be assimilated at the cost of the purchasing power of the dollar and the destruction of the living standard of Americans now and in the future. That was the first round. And the monetary effects, the inflationary effects of the first round of money printing hasn't yet been even begun to be assimilated, and now they've doubled down with this new program, George. It is a catastrophe in the making.
Charles, the Russians, the Chinese are saying enough is enough. How much clout do they have? How can they affect us?
They actually have an enormous amount of clout. And in fact, the Chinese, this is a little bit ironic because the Chinese are up to their eyeballs, of course, as everybody knows, in U.S. dollars. They have something like, I think it's $868 billion of U.S. dollar portfolio, U.S. government bonds in their portfolio. But if you think about it, when they bought those bonds, they paid us with real money that they had earned making and selling things. When the Fed buys an equivalent amount of U.S. government bonds, it pays with money that it just created that very morning. But, it's
the old fiat
ironic.
plan.
Who's giving us the better deal?
Yeah.
But it's certainly the rest of the world has a lot of clout, and the central bankers of the rest of the world, that they know what's going on, and they're shifting their eyes from side to side and wondering if this is. It's kind of like when you feel a trembler there in California, and you wonder if it's the big one. They're all wondering if this is about it for the dollar, and they're all awash in dollars, up to their eyeballs in dollars. And nobody wants to spook anybody else by announcing they're heading for the exit. But on the QT, they're all privately making moves to disinvest in the U.S. dollar. And here's the tragedy of it, George, in my view, is that the last people to know about it are the Americans, because when Timothy Geithner, the Secretary of the Treasury, goes to China, they're concerned about the value of their dollars and their huge investment, and he makes a representation. He goes to Beijing University and says, oh, no, the dollar, you never have a problem, everything will be fine. And the graduate students there know better, and they laughed at him. I mean, they're polite, but they laughed at him. So I guess it was last summer when Moody's, the investment service, and by the time Moody's figures it out, it's a little late in the game. Moody's said, if the United States doesn't do something about these deficits and this debt very soon, we're going to have to downgrade U.S. government bonds. United States Treasury bonds, and downgrade them, and they won't be, rated AAA securities any longer. So Geithner goes on ABC that Sunday morning on TV, and he says, "Oh no, that'll never happen. We'll never let that happen." But Americans don't laugh at him because they don't understand the situation the way that people around the rest of the world do with the dollar.
Charles, tell me, how will this affect the truck driver, the policeman, the nurse, the stay-at-home mom or dad, the people who are struggling right now to make ends meet, people who have been foreclosed on, people who can barely pay their mortgages? How will this all affect these folks?
Of course, they're the ones that will be. This is more than a tragedy. It's, in my view, it's criminal destruction of the lifestyle of the American people, because all of this money will destroy the life. It's a wealth transfer to Wall Street. The Fed's been very clear about it. Bernanke wrote a piece for the Washington Post, said, it'd be good for Wall Street. It'll run up stock prices, and people on Wall Street are widely talking about it. Yeah, this new initiative is certainly directed directly at stock prices, but the American people themselves will end up holding the bag, because the price of everything will start climbing. In fact, already, as you know so well, George, the commodity prices are going up. I mean, I'm looking at a chart right now from October of last year to October of this year. The foods like canola oil up, 36%. You got corn up 14%, oats up 68%, wheat up 74%, 48%. These are the raw material prices before they get to the level of processed food. And in the grocery store, it's the same thing with energy costs, natural gas up, gasoline up, heating oil up, and so on. I think by the first quarter of this coming year, that people are going to start screaming at the gas pump and at the grocery store about the incredible shrinking grocery bag and so on. And that's even before all of this Fed money creation has really worked its way into the system.
A lot of young people listen to this program, Charles. Even my 16-year-old granddaughter listens as often as she can. What do we tell them? What do we tell the kids who are, in high school, who want to go to college? What do we tell them about their future?
Well, I hope on the positive side is that they will learn from this experience, and they won't trust the next convoluted, involved, intricate Rube Goldberg monetary scheme that the authorities cook up, because they'll do anything to perpetuate the game and keep themselves in power, and they'll get together and they'll hatch some sort of special drawing rights and some sort of new World Bank currency or IMF currency or anything to keep the current players in charge. But if it's not an honest money, if it's not a redeemable money, if the paper money or the bookkeeping entries aren't just a warehouse receipt or a claim check on something tangible that you can go to the bank or the central bank or your local bank and get something in your hands. If it doesn't represent something and redeemable in something real, then it's another made-up monetary scheme that will come to another unhappy ending. And at least I hope after we get through this period, the young people have been disillusioned by the crock that they have been sold by the governing classes.
All right, stay with us, Charles. There's much more that I want to talk with you about when we come back in just a moment here on Coast to Coast AM, as well as we'll take some phone calls with our special guest this hour, Charles Goyette. His website, thedollarmeltdown.com. His latest book, it's out in paperback, The Dollar Meltdown, Surviving the Impending Currency Crisis with Gold, Oil, and Other Unconventional Investments. We'll be right back. Hey, next hour, Mike Barra joins us. He, of course, is the co-author with Richard C. Hoagland of the best-selling book, Dark Mission. Mike's latest, The Choice. We'll be talking about that with him. It's a fascinating story and investigation. Charles, explain something for me. So the Fed prints money out of thin air, basically. It's the fiat system. There's nothing backing it. How do they get away with it and other countries can't do the same thing?
Yes. Well, for one thing, the dollar is in a really unique position, and that's what happened as a result of our victory in World War II. Most of the rest of the world, much as the United States at one time used to hold gold in the central bank or in the Treasury and issue the paper dollars against them, and those paper dollars were restrained. The government was disciplined in how many of those it could issue based on how much gold it held, because it was, as I say, a claim check or a warehouse receipt. After World War II, the other countries of the world became persuaded to hold U.S. dollars as their reserves and issue their own currency against their holdings of U.S. dollars. Well, they can't print more U.S. dollars. Only we can do that, and so they see us printing these things without any restraint, without any discipline, spending money like crazy, and they're holding this as their reserve, as their central bank or national currency reserve, because they presumed at the time that they agreed to this deal that it would have value going into the future, and they see now that the value of it is declining rapidly, and so they're starting to break away. It's the problem that you see in Greece. Greece, if it has a solvency issue, it can't pay its bills. It can't just print up euro because they're not in charge of the euro. If they had an independent Greek currency, they could do it. And it's the same problem with the states in the United States. California just can't print more paper money as they go into debt. So the United States is kind of in a unique position, not only domestically, but globally as well, with this ability to print money, create money out of thin air, and have it serve as the world's reserve currency.
Would this economy fix itself if we just left it alone?
Yeah, it would be a wonderful thing to do. I mean, look at what the governing authorities, the governing classes have done to us all of these years. We've had a problem for the last couple of years of a debt expansion, a credit inflation creation that blew up on us, and so they have come back around and said, well, the answer to this is to pump more credit out there. Let's see if we can't blow up the old bubble. I mean, George, when I was a 12-year-old kid, if I had taken my bicycle to the Shell station and pumped the back tire full of air and blown it up, I wouldn't have thought that the solution was, to pump more air into it and fix it that way.
Yeah.
You can't reinflate the last bubble. So housing prices have needed to be down instead of being subsidized by artificially low interest rates. The American people have been trying to do the exact right thing under the circumstances of a catastrophe caused by too much debt. They have tried to save, yet the Federal Reserve is out there artificially creating low interest rates so that savers are disincentivized. Why save if the return is nothing or 1% or 2%? So we need these guys to get out of the way and let real world conditions of supply and demand prevail, and let people respond to real world, real market conditions in the economy, rather than artificial conditions created by the Federal Reserve with artificial interest rates, artificial credit creation, and more that got us into this mess.
Our first-time caller, A.J., Fort Myers, Florida. A.J., you're on Coast to Coast. Charles Goyette with us. Go ahead, A.J.